country is water. This is just a random photo from Gansu province in northwestern China. This is actually a reforestation effort that's not going very far because the plants weren't watered very well. But you have people trying to terrace the hillsides, which already are barren, and there's a tremendous erosion that comes from that. So although the air alone is now estimated to kill about 750,000 people prematurely each year in China, the water shortage is serious. The water is polluted. The groundwater is being used up. While the whole country is, on average, somewhat short on water, there's a tremendous maldistribution. The north is virtually a desert, and there's a lot of people who live there. The south has floods. The various ways proposed to deal with this, the Chinese government, is to have a massive redirection of the water, but it's a real issue. Similarly, on the gray front, we all know that coal is the main fuel China has that it uses now, will be using in the future, because that's what they have. Like every country we've discussed today, they have an energy crisis, a fuel crisis. So there is that problem. From the global warming perspective, their reliance on coal is a huge issue. This is what this looks like at the retail issue. This was this typical winter day in Beijing with a bicycle vendor having little stacks of charcoal briquettes to take to people to cook with. So I could go on, but point number one, yes, indeed, the situation is grave. Point number two, the more surprising feature is that there are positive developments. And I'll just kind of tick these off very quickly and refer you to a long article I just published last month, Atlantic Monthly, on this front. But for example, there are changes of personnel policy within the government. Anybody who knows large corporations or the military knows that promotion policy sets policy. And the promotion policy for cadres within the Chinese government as they go from mayor to governor now include not just ramping up GDP, but also trying to protect the environment. That's significant. There are changes of national policy which objective outside observers admire. For example, there's something called the Grain to Green program. This I show both to show the beauty of the Gansu countryside, the relative poverty of a lot of people, and this is a before picture, because the grain to green policy is taking a lot of land and taking it from grain production back to forest, to bamboo, to trees, and all the rest. And this is a serious business. In Sichuan province, we saw people who had been terracing the hillsides now growing bamboo crops. This is again, the same before picture. Again, this is the reality of China. Mr. Gao is investing hundreds of billions of dollars. These are the people who saved that money that they're investing in the U.S. stock market and all the rest. So there are pluses in this green policy. There is demobilization, decommissioning of old factories, putting them out of business because they are so inefficient. There is a tremendous renewable energy surge underway in China. I believe they're now the world leader in solar power. This is a huge wind farm in Xinjiang province. This man is a kind of environmental savior of China. I discussed him in my article, Dr. Tang Xingquan. He has pioneered ways of coal cogeneration plants, which greatly reduce the need for coal. He notes as a side note that he's trying to improve China's environment, and sometime he will break his 60 cigarettes a day habit, and then his own environment will improve. And this is one of his factories that he has made to be much more efficient. The rule of law on environmental matters is becoming much more open than is the case in a lot of other areas in China. The media in China, as you all know, are controlled, but an area where they are being uncontrolled is essentially environmental muckraking. There are things they can't say, but when it comes to environmental pollution, crises that kill people in the provinces, they are more or less free to report these things as long as the blame does not reach too high up. So there are tremendous problems in China, but I think it is worth recognizing the things that are going well there because, as so many of our speakers have explained, if we just think it is all bleak, if we think there's no traction, if we can't distinguish or compartmentalize the problems, essentially there's no place to start. There are people working very hard in China to make things better than they were, and it's worth the outside world recognizing that, encouraging them. That brings me to my final point, which is, first was, situation is grave. Second is, but with positive developments. Now I depart from quoting the Chinese Communist Party and quote myself to say that there are tremendous opportunities in China, by which I mean opportunities to correct the world's, address the world's climate problems. One of the reasons, ironically, is that now conditions in China are so poor Buildings on average take twice as much heat to cool, twice as much energy to cool and heat as they do in the Western world. Factories are labor, they use cheap labor and also cheap energy, so there's opportunity with little marginal cost to expand this. Is opportunity because so much of the new infrastructure of the world will be built there. One of Jeffrey Immelt's associates who works on the airplane engine business in China says that 90% of the net sales of airplanes the next decade will be in China. And so that's where a lot of the efficiency battle will be fought. And there is an openness of attitude in much of China to these issues. So if you would like the 10,000-word version of what I have just given you, and I'm going to move to a scenic slide. This is Gansu province where you have the rolling hills. I'll skip to an even more scenic one. That's a coal plant. But that's an old Ming Dynasty era ruin of the Great Wall in the background and some haystacks in the foreground. This is, you can get more of it in the Atlantic Monthly if you go online. So that is my condensed pitch on the reason for rational optimism in China. Situation is grave, it's improving, and there are tremendous opportunities diplomatically, in business terms, and otherwise to deal with it. Now, that's the, thank you, thanks. That is very kind. Now I revert to my normal role as moderator. I speak in a slower pace because I don't have the same time pressure, and I tell you who we're about to hear. Again, the theme here is Body 2.0 of the way the new technologies we've been discussing in all other realms are also going to affect our knowledge of the body. You've just heard Michael Pollan speak on the food environment, the food ecosystem, and what we could do about it as individuals and for policy. All of you know, and any of you who have been to past conferences know Dr. Larry Brilliant, who's the executive director of Google.org. I'm going to introduce Larry Brilliant and let him introduce in turn Michael Pollan and other members of his panel who will talk about these issues, related questions of sustainability of food, new sciences of health and medicine. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Larry Brilliant.
Hi, everybody. I thought that before I introduce the panel, I would just like to thank my friends from zg1, who have been providing you with this amazing Islamic mystical music that you've been hearing all day. Didya and his father, who's not here, Samir Chatterjee, and Salman Ahmad, they sing a form of Sufi music which is so riveting, and they are so prominent, loved, important in the Islamic world that they once did a concert in Kashmir where the armed and warring parties stopped fighting because zg1 was performing. So thank them very much for coming here. And I didn't say that because we were going to have a conversation with Monsanto and slow food. That was not to focus on our conversation. I'm so pleased to be here with you. The two themes of our conversation today have been about serious sustainability and a power shift. There's nothing more serious than feeding all the world's poor and to creating a world that can feed itself. And the power shift that we will be discussing in our panel is to find out from whom and to whom does power have to shift in order to make critical decisions about the world's food. So joining me on the panel today is Sonal Shah, who is at Google.org, where she leads our global development efforts. She has a wide-ranging career previously at Goldman Sachs and was one of the founders of India Corps, a Peace Corps-like organization for returning Indians to go back to India. You've heard a lot about Michael Pollan. We're a little out of order here. We just had a wonderful conversation with Michael. How many people have read The Omnivore's Dilemma, have devoured The Omnivore's Dilemma? And so I don't need to reintroduce Michael to you. I have the privilege of introducing Hugh Grant, who is the CEO of Monsanto and my friend. And we became friends when we were together in Norway, and we went to see the seed vault, which is known as the Doomsday Vault, where germ plasma seeds from all over the world, more than 180 countries, are kept at -5 degrees centigrade. And I was standing there with Hugh, and I realized I was standing next to the CEO of Monsanto, the largest producer, seller of seeds in the world, and that led really to a line of inquiry which brings us here today. So if I can, what I thought I would do is spend about 2 minutes giving you an overview. Then we'll ask each of the panelists 2 or 3